Chapter 43. This was the first floor of Akron. The entire history of Arath and Akron covered one wall of this wide-open hall, and quite a few stories related to Siena were recorded among the rest of the history. This royal library not only stored several grimoires of immense value, but on the upper floors, it also kept the various vestiges left by those legendary archwizards who had left their names in the history of magic. For being a library, this place also really resembles a museum, Eugene thought. Eugene stood and read what was written on the wall with his hands behind his back. Just as expected, what Eugene found the most interesting were the contents about Siena. Siena's vestiges were stored on floors 12 to 14. Among all the archwizards whose names were recorded in Akron's list of prominent figures, Siena was the only one with 3 floors dedicated all to herself. That was just how much of a role the name Siena Meridian had played in the history of Arath. No, in the history of magic. She was the archwizard who had faced off against the demon kings together with the great Vermouth. Vermouth hadn't really contributed much to the further development of magic, but Siena had settled in Arath and spent a long time as the Green Tower Master. She had established the Circle's magic formula, 1, and allowed it to spread so that countless wizards could learn from it. She really was working hard all her life, Eugene thought with a wry smile as he read the list of Siena's accomplishments. But it really doesn't suit her. Live an ordinary life, get married like everyone else, have a child, live peacefully and become a grandmother. That was what Siena had told Hamel she wanted to do when she retired. Despite having said that, Siena had spent her entire life alone. While he was at the Red Tower of Magic, Eugene had found various books written about Siena. But even though she had lived in Arath for nearly 100 years, she didn't seem to have had even the slightest scandal in all that time. Although she was known as the Wise Siena, several of Arath's history books had given Siena a different title, the Seeker of Truth, too. Siena had lived alone her whole life without consuming any alcohol or living a life of luxury, and she had spent most of her time in either the Green Tower of Magic or her mansion. She never met with any of her 3 disciples privately outside of the Tower of Magic, and she had never made any appearances at events like parties either. But these anecdotes about Siena bore no resemblance to the Siena that Eugene remembered. According to Hamel's memories, Siena had enjoyed drinking. Although it wasn't to the same extent as Anise, throughout their trip, Siena would constantly steal Anise's holy water and drink some as she listened to the latest gossip. Siena had also loved playing around. She loved drinking and chatting with the mercenaries staying in cheap taverns, and she also enjoyed talking to strangers. How could Siena, with her lively personality, have lived such an ascetic life for this long period of nearly 100 years, to the extent where she came to be called a seeker of truth? Eugene absolutely couldn't believe such a fact. "Hey kid," a voice called out. Caught in the midst of reading Siena's records over and over again with a frown on his face, Eugene turned to see the White Tower Master, who was smiling as she twisted strands of her curly hair between her fingers. "What are you reading so intently?" she asked. "Is there a wizard that you're interested in?" Instead of answering the question, Eugene asked about something else. "Is the discussion over?" Behind the White Tower Master, the other wizards were walking out of the room. The White Tower Master nodded. "It's over. We didn't keep you waiting for too long, did we?" "It was actually far quicker than I expected it to be," Eugene replied. "If we were forced to come to a unanimous opinion, even the whole day wouldn't have been enough." "If that's the case, how did you reach a conclusion?" "We held a majority vote, of course." With a grin, the White Tower Master turned and looked backward. 5 people approved your entry, 2 people opposed it, and 1 abstained, she revealed. Eugene responded, "That was more support than I had expected. Aren't you curious about who approved, who opposed, and who abstained?" "As long as I know that more people approved than opposed, I'm fine with that." "If that's the case, then am I allowed to go to the upper floors now?" "I mean, you're allowed. After all, that is what the majority vote decided." Since it looks like you aren't all that curious, allow me to just tell you. I'm the one who abstained." Eugene's eyes widened at these words. From the way she had walked over and started speaking to him in a friendly tone, he had been sure that she was one of those who had approved his entry. While Eugene tilted his head in confusion, the White Tower Master giggled as she looked at him. "From the atmosphere in the room, it felt like there would be a lot of people voting for you in any case, so I didn't feel like the outcome would change just because I abstained," she explained. "Oh, but there's no need to worry. Although I may have abstained, I'm not opposed to you entering Akron." But no matter your reasoning, you didn't approve my entry either, Eugene refuted. That may be the case. The truth is, I felt a bit ambivalent about it. You might be overflowing with talent and full of potential. However, isn't it just a fact that you're still a bit too young? As she said this, the White Tower Master lowered her voice. Then, leaning over slightly towards Eugene, she whispered quietly, and besides, the crucial point is that if I showed my support to either side through my vote, I would just get caught up in an annoying argument. You can see it in their faces, right? They all still look upset. Even though the majority vote has already been cast and a conclusion has been reached, they'll just change the location and start arguing once more. And what about you, White Tower Master? Eugene asked. Since I abstained, I don't need to care about it. I can just tell them honestly that I won't change my neutral position no matter what they want me to hear. After straightening up once more, the White Tower Master waved her hand toward the other wizards. The only person who showed any reaction was the Blue Tower Master, who still had the uptight look on his face. After shooting a disgusted expression at the White Tower Master, he sighed deeply and made his way out of Akron. The White Tower Master suddenly said, "The Blue Tower Master approved." Eugene was slow to respond. I'm talking about your permission to enter Akron." At first he was opposed to it, but he seemed to have changed his mind along the way. Eugene felt surprised at these words. From the moment he had entered the room, the Blue Tower Master seemed the most blatantly dissatisfied with his presence. But it seemed that the Tower Master had ultimately changed his opinion. "Now then, dum. Who do you think the two opposing parties were?" the White Tower Master asked. "I said that I wasn't curious," Eugene grumbled. "It was the Green Tower Master and the head of the Wizards Guild." "Why are you still telling me this when I've said that I'm not curious about it? Are you really 17 years old? What's with that cold reaction? Shouldn't you be more upset and frustrated?" "What is there to be upset and frustrated about? How dare they ignore the prestige of the Lionheart's direct line? Don't you have any feelings of offended elitism?" "I don't. Is it because you feel like you're just from a collateral branch after all?" It's not like that," Eugene sighed. "It's just, why should I show any elitism? How disgusting would it be for me to come all this way to a foreign country, only to get drunk on such nonsense?" "You're talking about your older brother, right?" the White Tower Master asked with a mischievous smile. Eugene looked confused for a moment and then glared at the White Tower Master. The White Tower Master's name was Melkith El-Haya. Even Eugene had heard about her. She was known as the best spirit summoner of their time. She was the first person in history to have signed a contract with two spirit kings at the same time. Not only was she skilled in spirit magic, but she was also a great wizard who had reached the level of being called an archwizard in general magic as well. "You really do keep saying things that I don't want to listen to. Do you have some kind of grudge against me?" Eugene probed. "Nope," Melkith denied it. "Then do you have any ill feelings for the other wizards?" "No way. Do you really think that the words I said just now were an attempt to stoke bad blood between you and the others? It's nothing like that. What would I get from poisoning your impressions of them? If that's the case, why are you telling me all this?" "Because I'm interested." With a grin, Melkith pointed at the storm sword W, which was hanging at Eugene's waist. "I know what that sword is. It's a treasure of the Lionheart clan, the storm sword WMD. I've heard that that sword has even been blessed with the protection of the Wind Spirit King." Eugene confirmed it. "Yep, so what about it? Although I'm interested in you as well, I'm even more interested in that sword of yours. For a long time now, I've always wanted to sign a contract with the Spirit King of the Wind, but he seems to be such a proud person that no matter how many times I try to summon him, he just won't appear. From what I'm aware of, Head Wizard, haven't you already signed a contract with two Spirit Kings? Aren't those two enough to satisfy you?" "Of course it's not enough. 1. Circle's magic formula was previously translated as Circle's magic system. We changed this to formula when OBW realized that formula was a better translation than system. 2. A term usually used to describe someone who seeks the Buddhist path to enlightenment through ascetic training. A Western equivalent may be the hermits who live in poverty." Melkith was staring at WMD with sparkling eyes. It looked as if she was just about to run over and try to tear it from him. "I've been trying really hard, you know," Melkith whined. "I've even begged the Lightning Spirit King and the Earth Spirit King, but they've told me that the Wind Spirit King won't sign a contract with anyone. That's why I sent such an earnest letter to the Lionheart's main family, begging to borrow WE. But do you know what they sent back in their reply? Ignoring her question, Eugene asked, "Is it all right for me to head upstairs?" They said that the treasures of the main family can never be lent to outsiders. Petty bastards, it's like they think I might take WNYD and go into hiding with it. I just want to use it as a catalyst of a contract, so why do they have to be so stubborn about obstructing me? Melkith complained. Eugene sighed. Hey, no matter what you tell me, I have no intention of loaning WEU, head wizard. Strictly speaking, it's not like I own WNYD. I'm borrowing it with the Patriarch's permission. It's fine. I won't tell anyone, Melkith promised. You can just lend it to me for a few moments. It probably won't take that long. Just a day at the most. If you want, you can even watch as I use it. In fact, this proposition was quite appealing to Eugene. Vermouth had died, and although Sienna appeared to be alive, she wasn't in a state where she could speak to him, as she seemed to be sealed away somewhere in this vast world. As for Anise, having become a pilgrim, her tracks had been cut off 200 years ago, and the whereabouts of Molan, that bastard, were similarly unknown. In this current era, only the Wind Spirit King Tempest knew the full story of what had happened 300 years ago in the castle of the Demon King of Incarceration. Of course, Tempest had played innocent, claiming that he didn't know anything, but Eugene definitely couldn't believe those words. Eugene cursed internally. That son of a bitch, his fat ass must have gotten pretty damn heavy over the years, since he won't come out no matter how many times I call him. During these past 4 years, Eugene had attempted to summon Tempest several times. Every time he had reached the next star in the White Flame formula, and every time his mana capacity had increased. Although he'd even attempted to use his contracted sylphs to reach out to the Wind Spirit King, Tempest had never once responded to any of his summons. With the amount of mana I currently have, I still can't summon Tempest, Eugene calculated. However, Melkith might be able to summon him. Wouldn't she also have the necessary qualifications as well? Amongst the spirit summoners who had made a name for themselves on this continent, Melkith was the only one who had made a contract with 2 spirit kings at the same time. Although he hadn't appeared whenever she had tried to summon him up until now, if WMD was used as the catalyst, who knew how Tempest might react? Melkith tried to keep Eugene from leaving. Kid, where are you going? I haven't finished talking to you yet. Eugene just asked. It seems that there's no point in listening any longer, so why should I stick around? Although he had his hopes up for it, Eugene wasn't going to show a positive reaction to Melkith's proposal just yet. Rather than allowing her to simply grab onto the bait, it was better to tease the line a bit to see if he was able to draw in a bigger catch. I asked, where are you going? Melkith insisted. I'm heading up, Eugene replied. Didn't you say that I'd been given permission to enter? Or do I still need something like an entry pass? If you go over there and ask for one, they'll give it to you. Melkith surprisingly answered his question immediately. Eugene headed over to the door that she had pointed out. Even a place like Akron had a library director. Although he was called the director, he was actually just a public servant who wasn't allowed to enter the upper floors and merely managed the familiars, one responsible for the maintenance. The elderly wizard currently filling the position immediately opened the door at the sound of Eugene's knock. I've already heard the news, the head librarian stated before Eugene could say anything. It didn't take long for his entry pass to be issued. Akron's seal was stamped on the back of Eugene's identity card, and that was all there was to it. If I had tried to go up without this entry pass, what would have happened to me? Eugene asked out of curiosity. You would die, the director casually replied, as if it was only natural. First of all, Akron's interception magic would pierce through your entire body, and if that wasn't enough to kill you, all of Akron's familiars would be put into attack mode. Although before that happened, the wizards with entry passes into Akron would have been dispatched to stop you. Did you know? The familiars who work here were all left behind by the archwizards whose names have been written on Akron's wall. This fact came from Melkith, who had yet to leave Eugene's side. As she gazed at WE with greedy eyes, she continued speaking. This, of course, includes those belonging to the Magic King who founded Aroth, a few from the Battle Mage who was called the Father of Battle Magic, and familiars which belonged to the wise Sienna as well. Eugene stayed silent. Kid, your reactions really are bland. Don't you have a tremendous amount of interest in Lady Sienna? Melkith asked with a half-smile. I saw everything earlier. You were reading the records belonging to Lady Sienna over and over again. On your first day in Arath, you headed straight to Lady Sienna's mansion for a tour, and last time, you even met with your friend from a different collateral branch at Meridian Square. Why do you know so much about my activities? Eugene asked, disturbed. Malkith teased him. It seems that you're not too aware of it, kid, but you're actually really famous. Of course I know I'm famous, Eugene replied with a snort. Your personality is a little unlike your appearance. It's lacking in charm. What do you mean by saying it's unlike my appearance? You have a handsome face, don't you? So please just think of my rudeness as the cost of enjoying my good looks. It's not just a little lacking. You really aren't charming at all. But why do you keep calling me a kid? I'm calling you a kid because you are one. Aren't you just 17 years old? Phew, you still smell like breast milk. There are some words running through my head right now, but I'm not sure if I should spit them out. What kind of words? I'll just keep quiet. Since they feel a bit too rude to express during our first meeting. There was no way that he was trying to say that she smelled like a granny, right? After gazing at Eugene speechlessly, Malkith sniffed her own body. I don't smell of anything, she insisted. Eugene returned the favor, and I also don't give off the smell of milk. Anyways, when are you going to lend me WNYD? I'm not going to lend it to you. Ignoring Malkith, who was continuing to follow him, Eugene turned to look at his surroundings. He was just wondering if he needed to find some stairs in order to go to the upper floors, but then he spotted the elevator in the corner. Malkith helpfully explained, do you see the hole beside the door? If you put your ID card in there, the door will open. You're going up to the 12th floor, right? Yep, Eugene admitted. See, it seems like you really do like Lady Sienna a whole lot. I don't like her. Could it be because you're just a young kid that you seem embarrassed by the strangest things? It's fine, it's fine. This big sister understands everything. Children are usually like that, aren't they? Especially boys. They're never honest about saying that they like what they like, and that's exactly why they're so cute. Isn't it going a bit too far to call yourself big sister? You just now, were you asking that because of my age? As far as I'm aware, you are already over 60 years old. Even if he added the years from his previous life to his current age, Malkith still had more years than him. Of course, going by Malkith's outer appearance, she looked like she was in her mid-20s at most. But just because she kept her looks young didn't mean her true age got any younger. Malkith defended herself. When you're young at heart, why should age even matter? So don't be shy and feel free to call me Big Sis. Eugene didn't reply to these words. Instead, he placed his ID in the elevator's slot and lost himself in some irrelevant thoughts. If Sienna truly was alive and had lived all this time, that meant that her age had to be over 300 years old. Eugene made a note to himself. When we meet, I might have to call her a grandma. Or it might be better to call her an undead rather than a grandma. Of course, if he really did say that in front of her, Sienna was sure to try to kill Eugene while oozing bloodlust. He would actually be very happy if that were to happen. With a wry smile, Eugene entered the elevator. Malkith didn't get onto the elevator with him. She stood outside the elevator and waved her hand at him with a grin. Come back soon, she said. Eugene asked, You're not going to be waiting here for me, are you? Even I'm not such a free-willed person, Malkith pouted. Although I actually want to go and take a look with you, But if I'm with you, I don't think you'll be able to focus. That would definitely be the case, Eugene admitted. Since that's the case, I'm not going with you. Although I won't get to see your shock when you face a glimpse of the truth. Fufu, your first time is definitely the most intense. As Malkith hid a laugh, she pointed at Eugene's lower body and said, It might be better for you if you wear a diaper? Why? You might just wet your pants a little. It had been pointless to ask. With a deep frown, Eugene pressed the button for the 12th, then he immediately pounded the button to close the door. The elevator climbed up. It didn't take that long for it to reach the 12th floor. It would only be a slight exaggeration to say that he had arrived on the 12th floor in the blink of an eye. Eugene was greeted by a voice saying, Welcome to Sienna's hall. As soon as the elevator doors opened, he was welcomed by a little girl looking up at Eugene with a broad smile. Eugene's lips parted silently as he looked down at the girl. The girl, who appeared to be about 10 years old, looked exactly like the Sienna that Eugene remembered. 1. These are the servants summoned or created by wizards to handle their chores. Chapter 44. While Eugene was lost for words, his mouth hanging open slightly, the young girl in front of him took off her large hat and bowed her head deeply. Nice to meet you, the girl hesitantly greeted him. Oh, Eugene stammered. I am the familiar in charge of managing Sienna's hall, the girl said with a bright grin. Her smile shook free Eugene's memories. In his previous life, since they had all met each after becoming young adults, Eugene had never seen Sienna as she was in her childhood. However, Eugene could see Sienna's childhood form in the familiar in front of him. With her light purple hair and an indescribably mischievous smile, although its age was a lot younger, the familiar looked just like Sienna. A familiar? Eugene eventually asked. Yes, the girl chirped in confirmation. That's, you really aren't Sienna? Eugene desperately suppressed his desire to ask such a question. Thinking of Sienna's illusion that he had met in the square in front of the bank, there was no way for this familiar in front of him to be Sienna herself. What should I call you? Eugene hesitantly asked as he examined the familiar. The short familiar's height was hovering around Eugene's waist. Thanks to that, Eugene had to bow his head slightly just to look at the familiar. Lady Sienna named me Mare, the familiar declared. No way. Did she really name you Mare after the mare in Meridian? Asked Eugene. Yes. It's such a glorious name, don't you think? While Mare replied with a bashful smile, Eugene could only snort in disbelief. Meridian was Sienna's surname. Having made a familiar in her own image, she had just ripped off the first half of her surname and attached it to the familiar as its name. What was she thinking? Eugene pondered. Hesitantly, Eugene asked. I'm just asking since I don't know much about your kind, but are familiars usually, as human-like as you are? I'm special, of course, Mare answered, her chin raised proudly. The one who made me was the wise Sienna, companion of the great Vermouth. The familiars found on the other floors aren't as special as I am. Is that so? Yep. You haven't been to the other floors yet, right, Sir Eugene? How do you know my name? Are you really a familiar? What are you trying to say? What kind of nonsense was that? As Eugene stared at Mare with suspiciously peeled eyes, Mare could only put a bewildered expression on her face. Sir Eugene Lionheart, didn't you just now register your name with Akron on the first floor? Mare reminded him. So I did, Eugene recalled. It isn't just me. All the familiars in this place are linked to Akron's systems. We know exactly who is entering and exiting Akron at all times, Mare creepily explained. Eugene changed the subject. So you were saying that you're a special case among familiars? Yep. Mare raised her chin once more and pulled a boastful expression as she explained. You can see it for yourself if you go to one of the other floors. The familiars there aren't as good at conversation as I am. They can only execute what was programmed into them when they were first created and respond to external commands. And what about you? I was created with the personality of my master, the Lady Sienna, as the basis. Isn't it a taboo of magic to create a living being? Eugene asked as he recalled the words he had heard at the bloodline continuation ceremony a few years back. Why can't you create anything living? Euad at that time hadn't shown any interest in the bloodline continuation ceremony, but his eyes had been shining brightly as he gazed upon Lovalian's magic. Unfortunately, even though Euad had held such interest in magic, he had still turned into such garbage after 4 years had passed. But I'm not a living being, Mare said in a tone that didn't have even a trace of uncertainty. Although it may look like I'm alive, I don't have a soul like all living beings have. My body was created through Lady Sienna's magic, and as for my consciousness... Mare returned the hat to her head and turned to look behind her. Only then did Eugene also tear his gaze away from Mare to look ahead of him. Up ahead he saw a large sphere of light floating in the room, with several orbiting rings slowly rotating around the sphere of light. It's in there, Mare declared with a bright smile. Eugene stared blankly at the sphere. It was his first time seeing such a three-dimensional artwork. Even at first glance it gave off a mysterious impression, but Eugene's senses detected an absurdly huge and elaborate arrangement of mana located within the sculpture. What on earth is that? Eugene eventually asked. Mare smiled. That's a great question. Mare puffed out her chest and threw her shoulders back, tilting her head backward in the process and causing her large hat, which was far bigger than her head, to also tilt backward. From the way her hat remained perched on her head despite looking like it could fall at any moment, it seemed like she was accustomed to making such movements. That is the distilled essence of all the magic that Lady Sienna developed over the course of her life. That is witchcraft. Mare revealed with a prideful cry. Eugene's jaw couldn't help but drop once more. This was witchcraft? The grimoire that Sienna was said to have just finished writing before she disappeared and was said to have been divided into 3 volumes. How does that look anything like a book? Eugene protested. Mare sniffed. It's an outdated prejudice to say that a book should look like a book. That just sounds like nonsense. It's only natural that Sir Eugene doesn't understand it. After all, there's no way that Sir Eugene is capable of understanding Lady Sienna's magic when even the Tower Masters can't comprehend it, right? Mare's words were overflowing with pride, and her mischievous smile was full of confidence. And at the same time, her attitude subtly looked down upon the one facing her. She had said that she was based on Sienna's personality. Indeed, Mare was very similar to Sienna in the way that she was annoying and lacking in any charm. You said that your creation was based on Lady Sienna's personality, right? Eugene felt the need to confirm it. Yes. Mare answered proudly. If that's the case. Right up until she disappeared, was Lady Sienna's character similar to yours? Eugene recalled the appearance of Sienna that he had seen in her portrait. It had a warm and benevolent smile that had seemed unlike her. The Sienna that Eugene remembered had never once shown that sort of smile. Of course it's different, Mare replied with a grin. Lady Sienna was much nobler and overflowing with dignity. She didn't laugh much and was solely preoccupied with researching and developing magic. After a brief pause, Eugene asked, if that's the case, then why is your character like that? What's wrong with my character? Even though you were based on Lady Sienna's personality, you seem completely different from the Lady Sienna you described. Of course I am. That's because the personality I was based on is Lady Sienna's childhood personality. That annoying chick. Looked like she was even more annoying when she was a little girl. Eventually Eugene changed the subject. So what did you mean by saying that your consciousness is in there? Mare hesitated. That's a tricky question. How should I put it so that you, Sir Eugene, who hasn't had much education, can understand it? Just tell it to me in a way that's easy to understand. I'm something like an artificial intelligence that Lady Sienna created for witchcraft. That was certainly an easy concept to understand. Mare explained, my consciousness is maintained by witchcraft's magic, and the purpose of my existence is to protect and maintain witchcraft. I have been supervising this hall following the orders that Lady Sienna gave me 200 years ago. Eugene walked past Mare without saying anything. He could feel Mare begin to follow along behind him at a quick trot. Why did Lady Sienna use her childhood personality as a base for you? Eugene asked. Just to reminisce, said Mare. Reminisce. It might still be hard for Sir Eugene to understand, but most adults find it hard to recall their childhood. Although their memories might remain clear, they often can't quite remember what kind of personality they may have had just from reconstructing those memories. I guess that's the case. So, to reminisce about her childhood, Lady Sienna decided to restrict my personality to one based on her childhood memories. Her magic was so amazing that it was easy for her to call up those distant memories. Eugene came to a stop in front of witchcraft. Having gotten this close to it, its majesty really was impressive. The glowing sphere that was encased within several rings was the distilled essence of an archwizard's understanding of magic that had been preserved for hundreds of years. Eugene suddenly thought of something. If that's the case, do you have all of Lady Sienna's memories? No way, Mare said, bursting into laughter. Although Lady Sienna may have used her personality as the base for mine, she didn't go so far as to share all her memories with me. If she had, there was a good chance that my existence could be abused. That sounds about right. It was no exaggeration to say that Sienna was the most important wizard in the history of magic. If Mare had all of Sienna's memories, there was no way that the wizards of Aroth would have left her alone. They might have dismantled Mare in order to extract all her memories of magic. Or else they could have used her to research new magic. No matter how much the wizards respected Sienna, if there had been something like that in front of them, they wouldn't be able to call themselves wizards if they didn't take it apart to study it. Eugene concluded, the fact that they haven't means that it either couldn't be done, it didn't need to be done, or they had already done it. Eugene openly stared at Mare. As far as Eugene's understanding went, Mare's very existence as witchcraft's artificial intelligence was absurd. It was just as Lovelyan had said. When the head wizard had first read the first volume of witchcraft, he had said that all the magic that he learned up to that point in his life now seemed like child's play. Certainly, this is far beyond the realm of ordinary magic. Eugene nodded in understanding. Was this why Melkith had warned him to wear a diaper, because he might wet himself? As Eugene recalled Melkith's mischievous smile, he shook his head. The original text of witchcraft is still under the sole care of Akron. Any wizard permitted to enter Akron is allowed to read witchcraft, Eugene considered. Since the secrets of Mare's consciousness and existence were clearly recorded within witchcraft, there was no need to dismantle her. Eventually Eugene asked, "Do you know why Lady Sienna went into seclusion or where she went?" "Of course I don't know," Mare huffed. Lady Sienna's disappearance was both surprising and secretive. Neither her disciples nor the servants at her mansion nor myself knew anything about Lady Sienna's retreat into seclusion. Really? Sir Eugene, how many times do you think I've been asked a question like that over the past 200 years? Mare's expression had shifted. She no longer puffed out her chest, her shoulders had slumped, and the pride-filled smile on her face disappeared. Her cold, dull eyes seemed to lack even a single ray of light and were framed by scrunched-up brows and a twisted half-smile. That smile was so similar to Sienna's that it gave Eugene goosebumps. I've heard that question so many times that I've lost count. I was already stored in Akron long before Lady Sienna decided to go into seclusion. But the King of Aroth, the Tower Masters of that time, the head of the Wizards Guild, and countless other wizards still captured me and asked me for Lady Sienna's whereabouts, Mare complained bitterly. Had something like that really happened? Mare continued, I told them that I didn't know anything. However, just like you did now, they didn't believe me. So I told them to just do what they pleased. Then men who didn't even know what they were doing and were lacking in skills started trying to access witchcraft and messing with my memories. They seem to have lost their ability to learn from their mistakes since they keep finding me in order to repeat the same attempts every few decades. So they'd already done it. Since Sienna went into seclusion, Arotha's wizards had already scoured witchcraft and Mare's mind several times. However, I really don't know anything about Lady Sienna's disappearance, Mare repeated. The last time I saw Lady Sienna, she showed no signs of wanting to go into seclusion. Looks like I've asked you a pointless question, Eugene apologized. As long as you're aware of that. Eugene stepped away from witchcraft. Although he wanted to take a closer look at Sienna's magic that had been stored within it, the truth was that he currently did not have the confidence to understand it even if he did see it. They say only the first volume is displayed at Akron, is that correct? Eugene asked. Yep, Mare confirmed. He followed with another question, are the other 2 volumes stored here as well? Nope, Mare shook her head. No, I mean that is definitely the original text of witchcraft, but only the first volume is stored inside there. Lady Sienna took the other 2 volumes with her when she left. What? Eugene exclaimed in surprise. Mare seemed hesitant to admit it. Lady Sienna extracted the 2nd and 3rd volumes from the original text, and when only the first volume was left, she donated the original text to Akron. Thanks to that, I've really suffered a lot. Not only do they want to find Lady Sienna's whereabouts, but they also want to find the location of the 2 other volumes. As she said this, Mare drew closer to Eugene. Sir Eugene seems to have a lot of interest in Lady Sienna. Eugene defended himself. Isn't that true of everyone who comes here? That may be the case, but Sir Eugene isn't exactly an ordinary wizard, right? Although I have never been able to leave Akron or had any reason to, for these past hundreds of years, even I have heard about the Lionheart clan. Mare lifted her head to look up at Eugene and continued, the clan left by the Great Vermouth. This is my first time actually seeing one of his descendants, so it feels a little amazing. There's no need to go so far as to feel amazed. No, I really am. From what I can recall, before Lady Sienna donated me to Aroth, she never once interacted with the Lionheart clan. She never even met with Vermouth again. Eugene was also aware of these facts. In the 300-year-old history kept by the Lionheart clan, there was strangely very little contact made with Sienna and Anise. The same went for Molin as well. Although Eugene didn't know the reason, that fool, he had never once come to see Vermouth after Vermouth was done establishing the Lionheart clan. In the end, after Molin had stepped down from his throne, his descendants, the royalty of the Northern Roar Kingdom, and the Lionheart clan had begun making contact little by little. But considering the relationship and ties between their ancestors, the connection between the royal family of Roar and the Lionheart clan was pretty shallow. Eugene definitely couldn't tell the reason for this. Although Vermouth was a bastard with abysmal social skills, Anise had followed Vermouth while claiming that he would be the hero to save the world. Mollen had also been intimidated by Vermouth and had usually refrained from his foolish behavior when standing in front of the hero. But why hadn't they stayed connected after returning from Helmuth, without ever meeting with each other? Eugene recalled. According to the records of the Lionheart clan, there was no further interaction after the clan was established. The next time that any of the companions met was at Vermouth's funeral. Vermouth's funeral had become a day of national mourning for the Kiel Empire. At that time, Anise had recited a tribute as the Saintess of the Holy Empire, and Mollen, as the king of the Northern Ruhr Kingdom, had taken off his garish crown and personally carried Vermouth's coffin. As Aratha's Green Tower Master, Sienna had, when it looked like the sky was about to pour down with rain, she had used her magic to part the sky and made warm sunlight shine down on Vermouth as they parted ways with him. In the end, the only reunion of these companions following their return from Helmuth was for Vermouth's funeral. This made Eugene feel like there was a strong sense of separation between them, and this filled him with complicated questions. Eventually, Eugene asked, "In your memories, were there any times when Lady Sienna talked about her former companions?" "There were times she would look at Sir Mollen and call him an idiot," Mare confessed. "And Anise? She called her a snake-like woman." "What about Hamel? Idiot, son of a bitch, fool and motherfucker. Didn't you say earlier that Lady Sienna was much nobler and overflowing with dignity? And you said that she didn't even smile much. Even a noble person overflowing with dignity can do something like swearing. Also, whenever Lady Sienna talked about her former companions, she never once appeared to smile. Instead, her expressions always seemed like she was about to cry." As Mare recalled those memories from hundreds of years ago, she turned her head and spoke, especially when she would talk about Hamel. It was extremely distressing for her. A large portrait hung in the direction that Mare had turned her head to. It was the same portrait as the one hanging in Sienna's mansion. The portrait where she had on a benevolent smile. "That portrait is a forgery," Mare revealed. "A forgery?" Eugene asked. "Lady Sienna never once smiled like that." "She might have smiled like that sometime before creating you." "No, that's definitely a forgery. Of course, that portrait was painted before I was created. But I once asked her directly during the frequent talks Lady Sienna held with me to establish my personality." "What did you ask her about?" "I asked Lady Sienna why she always seemed so sad." Mare looked at the portrait for a few moments before looking up at Eugene. Then she mimicked the same smile as the one that Sienna had on in the portrait and said, "Although Lady Sienna wasn't able to smile like me, she explained to me why she would leave behind a portrait like that. If it was meant to be passed down to future generations, it would be better to see a smiling face rather than a sad face. As for that portrait, the artist just randomly drew a smile. Perhaps that's why Lady Sienna didn't like it very much. Although the portrait is currently up for public display in her mansion, at least while I was there, the portrait was always left hanging with its face against the wall. That goes for the portrait in this hall as well." Eugene silently contemplated the portrait. "I'm the one who flipped over the portrait in this hall," Mare confessed. "Because it's true that it's always nice to see a smiling face." Eugene unconsciously reached out and patted Mare on the head. However, Mare immediately knocked away his hand and gravely said, "Don't cross the line." Coming to his senses, Eugene apologized. "Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Although I might have a smaller body than you, Sir Eugene, I've been here for over 200 years, you know." "Did Lady Sienna have anything to say about Vermouth?" Mare pursed her lips and turned around. She didn't say anything about him. Was she mad that he had patted her head? Without looking back at Eugene, Mare walked off with short, quick steps. She didn't make any compliments, curses, or even observations about him. Chapter 45. "That staff is the one that Lady Sienna used throughout most of her life," Mare said, acting like a tour guide. Witchcraft wasn't the only item in Sienna's hall. The various magical tools that Sienna had used during her lifetime that couldn't be kept in her mansion because it had been opened up as a tourist attraction were stored here instead. For example, the staff that Mare was pointing to. That item was also included in Eugene's memories. "It's called Akasha," he recalled. "As expected, you already knew about it." Mare smiled triumphantly and puffed out her chest. "There is a type of tree known as the fairy tree, which only grows in Samar Forest, the sanctuary of the elves. Shah, the most powerful magic staff in the world, was made from the roots of that 1,000-year-old tree which grows in the center of their forest. Her voice, which was trembling with excitement, really made Eugene feel like he was listening to Sienna. Sienna had personally explained the staff's origins to him a long time ago, and like a parrot she had kept repeating those boasts about it whenever she got drunk. Mare continued her tale. The elves believe that the ancient tree holds the spirits of their ancestors and that its roots support the entire world. This world tree is the center of the elves' religion. You know what that means, right? Those arrogant elves actually cut off a root of that ancient and sacred tree in order to make the staff as a gift for Lady Sienna. Sienna wasn't an elf or even a half-elf. Although she was a human, Sienna was often associated with the elves. Among the many rumors about where she might have gone into seclusion, a few speculated that she may have taken refuge in Samar Forest, the sanctuary of the elves. Sienna didn't know who her parents were. When she was just a baby, she was abandoned in the great jungle at the southern tip of the continent, the Samar Forest. Usually she would have been eaten by a monster or a wild beast, but Sienna's luck was good that day. An elf who just so happened to be passing by was drawn to the baby's cries and saved Sienna. That was how Sienna was taken to the elves' sacred grove, which lay somewhere in the heart of that jungle. The elves there were not too welcoming of Sienna. However, after discovering that she had tremendous magical talent, they recognized her as one of their own and taught her the magic of the elves. As Eugene stared at Akasha with blank eyes, Mare continued the lecture in her high-pitched voice. Lady Sienna is the first person to ever own a staff made from the roots of the world tree. Even among the elves, this was an unprecedented honor. Not only that, do you see that thing over there? The red jewel at the end of the staff. If you're curious to know what that is, it's a dragon heart, Eugene interrupted. Mare took this interjection in her stride. Yes, that's right. Among all the magic staffs that exist in the world, there are only 2 staffs that have incorporated a dragon heart. One is Lady Sienna's Akasha and the other is Vladimir. Eugene answered the unspoken question in a calm tone. That terrible staff had still been around 300 years ago. At that time, Vladimir's owner was a lich named Belial, a servant of the demon king of incarceration. Eugene had an ill-fated relationship with that staff. Eugene needlessly glanced down at his own stomach. In his previous life, the one who had killed him was that lich, Belial. That guy was responsible for the powerful traps installed all over the demon king's castle, and their party had been constantly harassed by those traps without getting any time to rest. During their time in that castle, Hamel had been left with a body that was in danger of dying at any moment after a hole was pierced through his chest. From the very start, the castle of the demon king of incarceration was so torturous that it was incomparable to the castles of the previous demon kings. On top of that, all the demonic beasts and demon folk who guarded the castle were powerful enough to be a match for any of the previous demon king's servants. And even among those powerful guardians, there were 3 especially powerful demon folk. These 3 were known as Incarceration's blade, shield and staff respectively. While they were in the middle of fighting Incarceration's shield, Belial the staff had intervened. In the castle of the demon king of incarceration, it was impossible to completely remove the effects of black magic and any curses cast on them by the staff, even with Anissa's holy magic. Someone had been needed to push forward and open up a path. Hamel had volunteered for that role. Although Molen would normally have been the one to assume such a role, Hamel had rejected him and insisted he would take the lead, thus paving their way forward. It was impossible for them to conquer the castle of the demon king of incarceration without anyone dying. So if someone had to die for it, let that person be me, he had insisted. Hamel was strong. But he wasn't as strong as Vermouth. Hamel was tough. But he wasn't as tough as Molen. Having been well aware of these facts, he had taken the lead. So that even if he died, Molen would be there to endure the blows. Even if he could no longer fight, Vermouth would still be there to keep fighting. Once Incarceration's shield was defeated, Hamel had suffered so many injuries that he was already on the verge of death. Neither divine power nor magic could be used to heal his wounds. The evil power of the Demon King's castle and the curses of the Lich drove Hamel close to death. And once the battle with Belial Incarceration's staff was over, a large hole had been pierced through Hamel's chest. That was how his previous life had ended. Hamel had been killed by Belial and Vladimir. Eugene had definitely believed that Vladimir was destroyed. Just before he died, he had witnessed Belial's phylactery being shattered and the lich itself collapsing into dust. However, Vladimir somehow wasn't destroyed. Although he didn't know the full details of how it survived, the current owner of Vladimir was Count Edmund Kodrith of Helmuth. Along with the Black Tower Master Balzac, Edmund Kodrith was one of the 3 black wizards to have signed a contract with the Demon King of Incarceration. "Can I try holding it?" Eugene asked as he pointed at Akasha. At this question, Mare put on a mischievous smile and nodded. "Of course it's okay, but just so you know, it's impossible for you to cast any magic with that staff." "Why is that?" Eugene asked. "Akasha will only recognize Lady Sienna as its master." After Lady Sienna went into seclusion, several wizards tried to become Akasha's new owner, but none of them were able to receive Akasha's approval. If they couldn't use it, why just leave it here? They should have broken the staff and at least taken the dragon heart. Please don't spout such nonsense. Akasha is a treasure gifted to Lady Sienna by the elves and the dragons. Although it's not possible to be used just on its own, it holds a tremendous value. As Mare pointed this out with a tsk of her tongue, Eugene gave a faint smile. He felt some nostalgia from her answer. A long time ago he had also heard the same sort of thing from Sienna. "You should already know this as well, right, Sir Eugene? A dragon heart is literally a dragon's heart. Because the heart of one of their deceased comrades was sacrificed to make a staff for Lady Sienna. If someone were to break Akasha for it, while I'm not sure about the elves, the dragons will definitely make an appearance and strafe Aroth with their breath attacks." He had also heard something along those lines from Sienna. When he had joked about breaking the staff and dividing the dragon heart's mana between them, Sienna had thrown a beer bottle at him with a loud shout. "You ignorant bastard. You want to break what? Do you really want to doom us all?" Of course, Mare didn't swear at him harshly like Sienna had. Even so, hearing her say the words that Sienna had said with a face that resembled Sienna, caused Eugene to recall the memories of Sienna from his past life. This is... After standing there stunned for a few seconds, Eugene came to his senses with a thought. Not good. He was becoming too obsessed with the memories of his past life. Eugene shook his head vigorously and turned away from Mare. He hadn't come to Akron just to immerse himself in his recollections. "For now, let's just try and hold it." Saying this, Eugene reached out his hand. The staff was as tall as Sienna was. Although he was holding it directly, nothing seemed to have happened. After shooting a glance at Mare, Eugene attempted to infuse some mana into Akasha. But once again nothing happened. Akasha wouldn't accept the mana that he had offered it. Since he'd seen the illusion of Sienna, Eugene had held a slight hope that he might be able to obtain Akasha's approval. But it seemed that Sienna had left no such arrangements for him. "If you were going to leave something behind for me, I'd rather you'd have left Akasha instead of my necklace." He still wasn't sure who had left behind the necklace in the Lionheart's main estate. However, Eugene was almost certain that Sienna had been the one responsible for dropping it there. "Do you know what this is?" Eugene asked. Having had a sudden thought, he pulled out the necklace and showed it to Mare. Mare examined it and said, "It's just a worn-out necklace. So you don't recall having seen it before?" "There's no way that I could have. Didn't I already tell you that I haven't stepped foot outside of Akron in all these hundreds of years?" "Well, it doesn't matter if you don't recognize it." Without asking any further questions, Eugene tucked the necklace back inside his collar. Then he left Akasha behind and started looking around Sienna's hall earnestly. There were quite a few things that he recalled having seen before. There were the robes and hat that Sienna had always liked to wear. They too were artifacts of extraordinary magical value. The first floor of the hall was full of such things. With witchcraft at the center, its surroundings were filled with all the magic tools that Sienna had personally used. "You can't take any of it outside with you," Mare warned. Eugene waved her off. "I won't try and take them with me." Perhaps due to preservation magic having been applied to them, they were still in mint condition even though hundreds of years had passed. That isn't to say that they were in perfect condition though. The robes were frayed in many places. As Eugene tried not to feel bothered by that, he headed upstairs. "These books are the notes written during the process of constructing Akron." Mare continued to act as a tour guide. The 13th floor was packed full of bookcases. Although there had been a lot of books back in the mansion, the books on display there could not compare to the ones displayed here in terms of their value. The magic books of truly outstanding value were definitely not stored in the mansion but here in Akron. And that's a draft of the circle magic formula, written when Sienna was in the process of developing it. If you were to read it as you are now, Sir Eugene, you probably wouldn't be able to understand it. Even if it is a draft, the techniques and research used to develop it are extremely advanced. As Mare followed behind Eugene, she continued to mutter, "That goes for her other research journals stored in Akron as well." Among all the wizards who found their way here, none of them were able to understand Lady Sienna's research at first. Allowing these words to flow in one ear and out the other, Eugene pulled out one of the research journals from a bookshelf. Although the books in the mansion were on display, you weren't allowed to flip them open and read them. However, here you were allowed to read as many research journals as you wanted. Ha! A laugh slipped out before Eugene had even flipped through more than a few pages. "See, you have no idea what any of those words mean, right?" Mare rubbed it in. "I guess so," Eugene admitted with a grin as he turned away from the bookcase. He thought to himself, her handwriting is still as bad as ever. Sienna's horrible penmanship was forever preserved inside these books. It was already difficult to understand what she was talking about when she went on about mana this and circles that, but Sienna's scribbled chicken scratches required decryption in and of themselves. Eugene stood there for a few moments, reading Sienna's research journal. When it felt like his head was about to start spinning, he closed the book and looked around. It felt like there were about 100 volumes of books stored here. After glancing over all of them, Eugene opened his mouth and asked, "Aren't there any of Sienna's personal notes? Ones that don't talk about magic?" "There aren't any," Mare stated. Right before going into seclusion, Lady Sienna erased all the personal notes that she had left in her mansion. Looks like she was really thorough in covering her tracks. That just shows how much she didn't want anyone to know where she was going for her seclusion. "And what's your opinion on that?" Eugene asked as he returned the research journal to the bookshelf he had pulled it out of. "There's a lot of talk about where Lady Sienna might have gone into seclusion. Some say that she went to Helmuth, others say that she went to the Samar Forest, and a few even say that she was assassinated by the Black Wizards." "I believe that she went to Samar Forest," Mare replied with a shrug. "Although many people think she might have gone to Helmuth, from what I recall, Lady Sienna wasn't the type who would dare to do something so reckless and impossible. Of course. Right up until Lady Sienna went into seclusion, she was the most beautiful and strongest person I know. However, to challenge Helmuth's demon kings all by herself, Lady Sienna wasn't someone who would do something like that." "I also agree with that," Eugene nodded along. "For the Black Wizards to have assassinated Sienna is also unthinkable. Although at the moment, powerful Black Wizards like Balzac Ludbeth can be found in Aroth, 200 years ago, the Black Wizards who lived in Aroth were all insignificant and weak," Mare sneered dismissively. "But Black Wizards from Helmuth could have snuck in to assassinate Lady Sienna," Eugene said, playing the devil's advocate. "Ha! That's even more unthinkable. Sir Eugene, just think about it. Lady Sienna's magical barrier was even able to block the black magic cast by the Demon King of Fury," Mare shouted in agitation. Although it wasn't able to block Belial's black magic, Eugene silently noted. In terms of their magic levels alone, Belial the Lich's level was actually greater than that of the Demon King of Fury. Though that didn't mean that Belial was stronger than the Demon King of Fury. Mare continued her tirade. If the Black Wizards of Helmuth had really snuck in to assassinate Lady Sienna, there is no way they could have taken down Lady Sienna so quietly. There would have to have been enough surges of mana to shake the entire capital city of Pentagon to its foundations. However, no such disaster happened when Lady Sienna went into seclusion. That means that Lady Sienna must have gone into seclusion of her own will and could not have been murdered by anyone. Without calming down in the slightest, Mare continued to glare at Eugene. Mare refused to accept even the slightest possibility that her creator, whom she loved and respected, could be murdered by someone like a Black Wizard. "Lady Sienna must definitely still be in Samar Forest," Mare insisted. "Although I don't know where exactly the Elven Holy Glade is within that vast forest, Lady Sienna is definitely. Unable to finish her words, Mare drifted off into mumbles. 200 years was a really long time. If you were an ordinary human, you would definitely pass away during that time. Even Vermouth couldn't break free of the natural limits of his lifespan. She has to just be comfortably resting her eyes somewhere. Though I'm not sure if she's still alive," Mare reluctantly admitted. "I believe that she's alive," Eugene suddenly declared. Mare's slumped shoulders were bothering him. Although he wanted to pat her on the back, remembering Mare's stern warning from earlier, Eugene kept himself from reaching out unwantedly. Unsure how to continue, Eugene hesitated. The brave Sir Moulin was also still vigorously living it up just 100 years ago. So Lady Sienna should still be alive. She's probably just stopped her aging with magic or something like that. It looks like Sir Eugene really does like Lady Sienna a whole lot, accused Mare. You can't really call it liking her. Liar. You don't know what kind of expression you were making, do you, Sir Eugene? Mare lifted up her drooping shoulders and looked up at Eugene. Every time I tell a story about Lady Sienna, your eyes twinkle brightly, and whenever you see something that belonged to Lady Sienna, you become extremely immersed in its history. Mare listed the evidence. I've always had a liking for old stories, Eugene protested. Is that so? Then you should like that book as well. With a grin, Mare headed to a corner of a bookshelf. She took out a book whose cover had been faded by the traces of time. She read its title, The Great Adventures of the Hero Vermouth. Eugene's cheeks had started twitching from the moment he saw it. It's a famous fairy tale, isn't it? Mare proudly held it up. Since Lady Sienna and her other companions were always reluctant to talk about what happened in Helmouth, this fairy tale is actually the first book to tell the world about the legends of the Great Vermouth. It's a damned book is what it is, Eugene grumbled. Huh. Why would you call it a damned book? Mare asked, looking puzzled. I mean, the truth is that I actually like Sir Hamel the most and I respect and admire him. Eugene struggled to hide his embarrassment. But in that fairy tale, Sir Hamel is really made out to look like such an idiot. But Lady Sienna also called Hamel stupid, a son of a bitch, a fool and a motherfucker? No, he wasn't really like that. Sir Hamel wasn't stupid, a son of a bitch, a fool or a motherfucker either. Instead he was pretty nice and brave and in any case he was a great person. Why did he have to be the one to say such things? As Eugene felt a deep sense of shame, he sighed heavily. I'm afraid that Sir Eugene must have quite the weird personality. Usually, there wouldn't be anyone who likes Hamel after reading this fairy tale, right? Mare expressed her concerns. Sorry, but apart from me, our patriarch also said that he happens to like Hamel the best. Eugene defended himself. Mare argued, that just means that your patriarch is also a bit of a strange person. Are you really cursing my adoptive father right now? Eugene became aggressive in the face of his losing argument. I'm just saying he's a bit strange, so how is that cursing him? In any case, Sir Eugene, if you really do like old stories, then you should have read this book as well. It wouldn't be a lie to say that I read that book more than 100 times while I was still young. That might be the case, but this book is the first edition. It's different from the revised version that is spread throughout the world right now. You might not be aware of this, Sir Eugene, but this fairy tale was actually first published in Arath 300 years ago. Then who's the bastard responsible for publishing it? How would I know? After all, the author of this book is anonymous. He was probably a bard from long ago, no? How could the author have been a bard? Eugene snorted and shook his head. While he was wandering around the continent in his previous life, he had met quite a few bards, but he had never once encountered a bard in Helmouth. Or else, well, he might just be a novelist who gathered and connected all the rumors surrounding Helmouth. Although I don't know why he didn't leave his name on it. As Mare waved the fairy tale book around, she continued speaking. Lady Sienna also liked this fairy tale. Even though she wasn't someone who often smiled, sometimes at night when she couldn't sleep, she used to smile briefly while reading this book alone in her bedroom. I know because she read it to me as well. Did you say that the contents of the first edition are a bit different from the modern versions? Eugene asked. It's also been a while since I last read the latest revised version, so I can't be sure that it's exactly the same as the one you read. But as the first to come out, the first edition is a little more. How should I put it? It's a little crude. There's a lot of cursing. The anecdotes about Vermouth and his comrades are also slightly different. Should I say that they're a bit more pessimistic? Let me have a look. Eugene quickly walked over and took hold of the fairy tale book. It might be because the book was from 300 years ago, but the pages seemed really worn out. That was probably a sign of how many times it was read over and over again. Hamel was an asshole. Although that asshole fought so excitedly with Vermouth upon their first meeting, he couldn't even touch Vermouth's collar, and his face was thrown into the ground so hard that he cried. This son of a bitch. Eugene's face contorted as he cursed. Mare had said that it was crude and full of curses, and it really was. The version of the fairy tale that Eugene had read said that Hamel was an idiot, but at least it didn't call him an asshole like this one. Could the bastard who wrote this have been Anise? He wondered. Recalling Anise, whose eyes were always stuck in a cheerful smile, Eugene ground his teeth angrily. Although he considered comparing the handwriting to Anise's, the fairy tale book seemed to have been made by magic or using a printing press, so the writing was neat and mechanical. It's true that I was thrown into the ground face first, but I did at least manage to brush his collar. Vermouth even said that he shed a drop of blood because of me. And crying because my face was smashed? Where does this person get off with spouting such bullshit? As he tried to cool the boiling rage inside, Eugene placed the fairy tale back onto the bookshelf. After he had gotten a hold of himself, Eugene asked, "What's on the 14th floor?" The 13th floor is for research journals, so the 14th floor has the magic books that organize and connect all this research together. Although those will still be difficult for Sir Eugene to read, they'll still be easier to handle than these research journals. Because the explanations are a lot clearer, Mare eagerly recommended them. But aren't they still a lot worse than witchcraft? Eugene questioned why he should even bother with them. Mare snickered, her cheeks twitching as she tried to avoid sneering. Of course they're a lot worse. But this. Rather than trying to explain with words, it'll be better if you try to read witchcraft yourself. Well, to put it simply, let me explain the difference between the two. Witchcraft is harder to understand than it is to read, but as for the magic books on the 14th floor, if you can read them, you can at least understand them slightly. Although it might be unreasonable to expect that much from you, Sir Eugene. Turning around, Mare headed towards the elevator. For now, why don't we go up to the 14th floor? Mare suggested. You would probably prefer that floor to this one. Why so? Eugene asked cautiously. Because you said that you like old stories, right? And that you like stupid Hamel as well. Although Eugene couldn't comprehend these words, when they arrived on the 14th floor, he immediately understood what Mare had meant by that. Take a look, Mare giggled as she waved her hand forward. Those are the personal memories that Lady Sienna extracted for her own recollections. Those aren't just simply portraits, but are the real versions of Lady Sienna's comrades as she remembered them. Within the walls of the 14th floor, the figures of 4 people were clearly reflected. Over there, the handsome man standing in the center is the great Vermouth. Mare eagerly pointed him out. Vermouth looked exactly as he did in Eugene's memories. Beside him, the blonde woman whose eyes are smiling so much that it's impossible to see her pupils. That's faithful Anise. The saintess who carried around bottles of wine while calling them holy water. The macho causing you confusion about whether he's a troll or a human is the brave Molin. Even though his body was already so big, he was always carrying around an axe that was even bigger than his own body, and he was a fool who kept causing problems in every fight. And over there, the man who looks like he has a bad personality with a frown on his face is stupid Hamel. This is the one and only sole record of Hamel's appearance. You can only find his face here in Lady Sienna's hall. At that moment, Eugene couldn't find any words. Hamel, who had died in Helmuth, hadn't left behind even a single portrait for the world to see. Pwah! As he continued to look at this appearance from his previous life, Eugene eventually burst into laughter. If you were going to leave something like this behind, wouldn't it have been better with a smile on his face? As Eugene chuckled, he shook his head. Chapter 46. Although he wasn't sure from what moment these likenesses of their figures were taken, Eugene felt it was probably from just before they had departed for Helmuth. Vermouth, as he was pictured on the wall, didn't appear to have the moonlight sword on him. I also look like I have fewer scars. In his previous life, Hamel had ended up with a lot of scars. The many scars on his body had been covered up by his clothes and armor, and even his face had borne a lot of minor scarring. Around half of them had been obtained while he was working as a mercenary, and the remaining half were obtained in Helmuth. That Hamel in front of him had almost no scars on his exposed skin. Although he had a nasty expression, his eyes weren't all that offensive. From how neat and tidy his appearance was, this image had to be from before they had gone through all sorts of hardships in Helmuth. How handsome, Eugene eventually murmured. Right? Mare agreed. Although I've also seen this image a countless times, I still can't get over how handsome Sir Vermouth was. Eugene interrupted her praises. I was saying that Hamel was so handsome, not my ancestor. Mare's eyelashes fluttered. Her jaw dropped open as she alternated between looking at Hamel and Vermouth. Are you crazy? Mare demanded. Well, my ancestor, I admit that he's handsome, but Hamel also, he has his charms. With his, untamable countenance? And that bestial charm. Eugene's lips eventually fell shut as he felt an unbearable sense of shame. What the hell am I even saying? Although the shame he was feeling was already intense, Mare's gaze, which looked as if she was seeing something confusing and pathetic, made him feel even more embarrassed. That's just how I feel, Eugene finished lamely. You have quite the unique taste, Mare observed politely. That's just how people are. Untamable countenance? Bestial charm? If that's where your tastes lean, how about admiring Molin instead of Hamel? Just from looking at him you get the feeling that he's a bear, not a human. Isn't that a bit too much? Instead of a bear, at least say that he looks like a monster. Well, that also works. Mare couldn't deny those words. After glancing at Molin's bulging muscles with a disgusted eye, she eventually turned her gaze back to Eugene. Apart from the portrait, don't you have any other recordings of Lady Sienna's appearance? Something like these, Eugene asked curiously. Mare returned his question with one of her own. Sir Eugene, aren't you able to recall your own appearance without having to use a mirror? Eugene argued, but if she was going to leave something like this, she should have at least left her own figure, since all she needed to do was stand in front of a full-length mirror. Lady Sienna probably just didn't have any desire to do so. As she said this, Mare giggled. After all, she so disliked attention that she was even reluctant to leave behind the portraits. Now then, what exactly are you planning to do? What do you mean by that? Although I'm not too aware of the situation, the fact that you have been allowed in here despite only being 17 and lacking a high grasp of magic means that those arrogant wizards must have seen some amazing potential in you, Sir Eugene. Well, it's something like that. There's no need to act so humbly. Even without you doing that, Sir Eugene, reading just one of the books of magic stored here will make you realize how humble your talent truly is. As she said this, Mare looked at Eugene with a proud expression on her face. We don't just have Lady Sienna's hall here. Including Lady Sienna, 9 other wizards have had their names added to Akron's list of halls. This was the Royal Library, Akron. Here there were other floors dedicated to 9 other archwizards like Sienna. The topmost 15th floor was the Hall of the Magic King who had founded Arath. Below Sienna's hall on the 11th floor was the Hall of the Battle Mage who had been called the Father of Battle Magic. On the 10th floor was the Hall of the Great Spirit Summoner, the first human to have made a contract with a Spirit King. The 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors are used to store a range of magic texts, Mare continued. All of them are rare and valuable books of magic that were carefully selected by previous tower masters. Of course, although you were allowed to enter Akron because you possess the qualities to be called a genius, the magic stored in Akron was all created by fully fledged geniuses. Got it, Eugene nodded his understanding with a calm expression. He knew what Mare was trying to tell him. From an objective point of view, Eugene's knowledge of magic was still too shallow. Although he had somehow managed to get into Akron, it was impossible for him to self-study the magic texts stored here as he had done with the introductory books on magic back at the Red Tower of Magic. Aren't you able to cast magic? Eugene asked. I can't be the one to teach you. Mare rejected his unspoken question, shaking her head. There's no reason for me to do so, and the system programmed into me also strictly prohibits me from transmitting magic. For hundreds of years, many wizards have attempted to try and extract witchcraft from me, but none have been able to change my settings. After she had finished, Mare fell silent for a few moments. She had a complicated expression on her face as she crossed her arms in front of her. The only type of spells I'm permitted to use are ones for removing any dust in this hall or picking up small pieces of trash, Mare explained. Do you still want to see my magic? Eugene wordlessly responded. If so, please try to break into Akron without an entry pass. If you really do so, then I will make sure to appear faster than any of the familiars from the other floors to execute you, Sir Eugene. Is that really necessary? If you dislike that method, you could try to attack either witchcraft or myself. If you have a preferred method of death, Sir Eugene, I will do my best to fulfill your desire. It didn't sound like a simple joke when she said it like that. In any case, it looked like it would be impossible to be personally taught magic by Mare. After taking a few moments to think, Eugene headed for the elevator. As he walked, he asked Mare, even if you can't teach me, can you give me any advice about magic? That is also restricted, Mare admitted. If it were so easy for me to gently guide you into learning magic, wouldn't all the archwizards of Aroth have already mastered witchcraft? Witchcraft was just as infamous as it was renowned. Even though you couldn't even touch it without being first qualified to enter Akron, among all the archwizards who had entered this library, not a single one had yet to fully master the magic of witchcraft. Mare hesitated. If you do need some advice. Sir Eugene, how many circles have you reached? If I had to say it, I might be at the third circle, Eugene awkwardly admitted. Mare cringed. Really? It's only been a bit over 2 months since I started learning magic, Eugene defended himself. Considering how long it's been since you started, I guess you can be called somewhat of a genius. But even with that, you're still far from qualified to enter Akron. Until just now, Mare had been smiling as she joked about this and that, but when it came to magic, her attitude became cold and scornful. Even this sort of look somehow reminded Eugene of Sienna, causing him to smirk in amusement. What did you mean by, if I had to say it, I might be at the third circle? Mare demanded. I haven't actually created any circles, Eugene confessed. Don't lie to me. No, really. Without any circles, I've been using my cores as circles when casting magic. Is that the Lionheart clan's unique magic formula? It shouldn't be. I don't know how my ancestor used to cast magic, but the Lionheart's direct line doesn't have any record of such a magic formula. Although I can't be sure about any of the collateral branches. There were countless collateral branches of the Lionheart clan. Although they didn't seem to interact much with the main family, there were also families among the collateral lines who specialized in magic. Mare hummed contemplatively. If that's the case, is the magic formula that you're currently using something that you came up with on your own, Sir Eugene? Or did you get advice from some other wizards? I made it all by myself, Eugene declared. Mare was lost in thought. The elevator doors opened and they entered. While they were descending to the 12th floor, Mare was caught up in her own musings as she stroked her chin. Perhaps because the speed of their descent was so fast, her thoughts also seemed to quickly reach a conclusion. Mare appeared to be relieved as she said, Well then, it seems that your qualifications aren't as terrifyingly inadequate as I had feared. I was worried that your entry into Archon was bought mostly by the prestige of your family name. I think it may have played at least a small factor, Eugene admitted. I really appreciate such an honest attitude. Although it would be faster to just see your magic than hear it from you for now, what type of magic are you interested in, Sir Eugene? Are you asking so that you can give me some advice? I might not be able to teach you any magic personally, but I can at least point you in the right direction. I want magic that will be useful in a fight. Spirit magic would be okay as well. What a barbaric request. Mare clicked her tongue a few times in disapproval as she followed behind Eugene. Still, she continued to generously give her advice. The 10th floor is the Great Spirit Summoner's Hall. That hall is dedicated to the human who was the first to make a contract with the Water Spirit King. But it's not like you can be sure to make a contract with the Water Spirit King just because you've learned the magic stored in that hall, Eugene quibbled. Well, that may be the case. After all, the innate compatibility of the summoner is also important when making a contract with a spirit. As for the magic stored on the 10th floor, most of the spells there are meant to be applied together with the power of water spirits. If that's the case, they won't be of much use to me. I prefer wind spirits over water spirits. But something like compatibility isn't up to you to decide, Sir Eugene. Well, for now I get your point. If you want magic that's useful in a fight, then the 11th floor is definitely perfect for you. Because that hall is dedicated to the Archwizard, who was called the Father of Battle Magic. Is there anything else you would recommend? As Eugene asked this question, they came to a stop in front of Witchcraft. I'm not sure what type of fighting style you have in mind, Sir Eugene. Do you intend to solely use magic when you fight? Even though the Lionheart's main family is a famous martial family? Mare asked doubtfully. I'll use them both, magic and a weapon, Eugene clarified. How arrogant of you, Mare giggled. Even considering the potential Eugene had shown at such a young age, it still felt absurd that he was planning to use both magic and martial arts together when he fought. If that's the case, rather than the 10th floor, the floor below that will be of more use to you, Mare said, changing her recommendation. The magic texts on the 10th floor mainly deal with the proper application of battle magic and how to adapt the magic according to the situation. In other words, their difficulty level is extremely high. Although that's actually the case for all the magic in this place. But what's on the floor below? Eugene asked. It has some powerful and yet simple magic. The spells of the Fire Wizard and Ice Wizard, who were eternal rivals during their lifetimes. While the ice magic pairs well with water spirits. Since you said that you prefer spirits of the wind, it would be better for you to learn the fire magic instead. Although Mare was sarcastic, her advice was clear and helpful. Sir Eugene, once you've become quite proficient in fire magic, you can also go to the 7th floor. Although the difficulty of the spells stored there is quite high, once you've mastered them, there is magic powerful enough to wipe out an army or even a nation in a single spell. Have you heard of the Meteora spell, Sir Eugene? Of course I have, Eugene answered cautiously. That's the spell that rains meteor showers from the sky. Was it around 500 years ago? It was during an era of constant conflict between nations. The 8th hall is dedicated to the wizard known as Disaster, who destroyed several armies with his signature spell Meteora during that time. Akron is the only place on the continent that has a complete copy of the Meteora technique. Although Eugene didn't know if he would learn Meteora, he couldn't deny being interested in it. Moving on, Mare revealed, there's spatial magic on the 6th floor. Sir Eugene, if you wish to fight with your martial arts skills instead of magic, I would also recommend learning spatial magic. As long as you can completely master Blink, you will have an absolute advantage in any magical duel. Blink was a short-range teleportation spell. Although the distance that could be teleported differed on the level of the wizard casting it, Sienna used to be able to jump dozens of meters with a single blink. As he continued to listen to Mare's advice, Eugene slowly started to get an idea of what he could do with Blink. While teleporting here and there with Blink, he could either swing his weapon or cast a spell. As long as he was able to adapt to the style properly, he would be able to surpass his strength in his previous life. Since I wasn't able to cast even a single spark in my previous life, let alone Blink, to be able to do something that he couldn't do in his previous life, Eugene felt a fluttering sort of pleasure from that. Breaking out of his daydreams, Eugene asked, "And what about witchcraft?" Mare began a long-prepared lecture. Witchcraft contains an optimized mana application formula designed for circles. Through this, it can amplify the magical power created by a circle. It can also simplify any technique, increasing efficiency and removing the need for incantations. It can even allow multiple activations of the same spell through a single casting. Also, it can be used to imprint spells into your subconscious mind and store them there, allowing you to cast the spell immediately according to the situation. And you can even set a trigger so that the spell casts itself in response to external stimulation. Eugene was struck silent by this extensive list. Among all these benefits, the most impressive is that its circle provides the ideal application of force. Although most wizards nowadays already use circles, witchcraft's circle magic formula is far superior to ordinary circles. To put it simply, it allows you to exert maximum power with the minimum amount of mana. Sorry, but while I hear what you're saying, I don't understand it. Of course that's the case. If you could understand it just by hearing it, there wouldn't be any reason for witchcraft to be called the greatest grimoire in the history of magic, would there? With a broad grin, Mare puffed out her chest. Okay then, Eugene shrugged off the boasting, and just how am I supposed to read it? Close your eyes and reach out your hand, instructed Mare after that. Transmit your mana into witchcraft, Sir Eugene. If you do that, you'll be able to read it. He just needed to reach out his hand. For a few moments, Eugene stared at the sphere of light that was covered by dozens of rings. Since he wouldn't be able to understand it if he just kept looking at it like this, Eugene stretched out his hand as Mare had instructed. Although his hand was drawing closer to the light-emitting sphere, he couldn't feel anything like heat from it. However, he did feel a tremendous amount of mana. Ignoring his uneasy goosebumps, Eugene drew out his mana using the white flame formula. Would it be alright if he just poured his mana in as it was? Or should he apply it through the pseudo-circle that he used whenever he cast a spell? As he hid these worries, for now he just poured in his mana. Suddenly he lost all sensation in his body. He couldn't hear anything and he couldn't smell anything. Although his eyes shot open in alarm, he couldn't see anything either. He couldn't see Mare, who had been right next to him, nor could he feel her presence. Ah, he tried to voice this sound, but the noise failed to reach Eugene's ear. He couldn't even hear the sounds of his own body. It was only then that Eugene was somewhat able to grasp the situation he was in. This was a world formed within his own mind. Eugene's body didn't exist within this space. Once he had connected to witchcraft, only his consciousness was dragged into the depths of this place. It's similar to a dream, but also different. Things weren't changing according to his will like in a lucid dream. And he wasn't seeing any unpleasant hallucinations like in the bullshit pulled by night demons. Instead, he just felt an overwhelming sense of powerlessness. Since his body did not exist, he couldn't move anything. Among all of his senses that had been blocked off, only one sense remained accessible. His sensitivity towards mana. This mental world was packed full to the brim with mana. Although this place was constructed in Eugene's own consciousness, witchcraft's mana had flooded his head, creating an infinite sea of mana. In the middle of this sea, Eugene's sense of self wasn't even as large as a grain of sand. He couldn't even wander around and explore as he wished. So all he could do was contemplate the situation and wait. The mana. I can move it a little. Oh, that's right. So this is all the mana that I have currently. Eugene realized that the mana he could move was the mana that belonged to his own consciousness. But within this sea of mana, Eugene's mana was just as small and insignificant as his sense of self. If he gathered in all his mana, would he be able to get out of here? That was probably the case, but Eugene didn't want to test that just now. After all, he hadn't seen anything yet. Eventually the sea began to move. A huge wave formed in front of Eugene, only to become a single ring. It was a circle. The single circle began rotating slowly, then at some point, it accelerated so fast that he couldn't even tell it was spinning. With each rotation of the circle, the mana that flooded this world was drawn into the circle's rotation, copying it. Through this, the circle multiplied one at a time. Of the levels of magical aptitude that was divided into circles, the highest level was the 9th circle. However, the copied circles did not stop at 9. The moment the 10th circle was created, the mana that had been drawn into the circle's rotation stopped, leaving an immense line of circles. These 10 circles separated, but after pulling apart, they joined together once more to form a single giant circle, and the center of this circle was filled with an infinite amount of mana. That alone would have been alarming enough, but the phenomenon wasn't done yet. Countless circles began to be created within the larger circle. 1, 2, 3, 4. At this point, Eugene gave up on counting. Having drawn out an infinite amount of mana, the greater circle was creating an endless amount of circles within it. These circles kept multiplying, dividing, intertwining, multiplying once again, dividing, and although he was simply looking at it, just the sight of it alone was shaking Eugene's consciousness. It felt like an optical illusion that exhausted the mind and caused motion sickness, but no, it wasn't an optical illusion. Within that circle, an infinite amount of circles truly were repeatedly multiplying, dividing, and intertwining. Even if I can see it, I don't think I can understand it. All the magic that he had learned in his life until that point had felt like child's play. That was what Lovelian had said. A glimpse of the truth. That was how Melkith had described it. Both of them were correct. His consciousness wavered. The transformations taking place with those infinite circles and all the possibilities that they contained, Eugene definitely couldn't fully comprehend all of them. However, he knew this much for sure. The wise Sienna, she was the most astounding and powerful wizard in human history. Hold on. His consciousness began to collapse. Eugene sensed what was currently happening to him. An unstoppable shudder was about to close in his mind and cause him to fall unconscious. I don't want to faint, but... Hold on, no way. It might be better for you if you wear a diaper. Why? You might just wet your pants a little. Melkith's earlier words weren't just a joke. Just when did he last go to the bathroom? Eugene desperately attempted to keep a hold of his consciousness, but in this world that was connected to witchcraft, Eugene's consciousness was pitifully weak. Resistance was impossible. No way. Please, my excellent body, you can't let me down, don't let me piss myself. With this earnest prayer, Eugene lost consciousness.